2 weeks ago, I released a video about the skills that I feel I need to work on and how I plan on doing it. In today's video, I thought it'd be fun to talk about a skill that I would see as a strength of mine and how I plan on teaching it. After asking friends and family what skill they would associate with me, the common denominator was public speaking. I do have a fair bit of experience in front of audiences, but how I got there may surprise you. In my podcast episode with Richard Cartwright, he talks about how there's a greater fear of public speaking than there is death, so this may be a good skill to talk about today. The first thing to mention when it comes to public speaking is that it is a skill, meaning it's something you can work on. I didn't come out the womb just TED Talk ready with excellent posture. Far from it. In fact, my mother actually nearly brought me to therapy as a child because she thought I was behind in speech and language. Apparently that wasn't necessary. I was just a bit of a late bloomer when it came to speaking. My first ever public speaking experience was actually my first Holy Communion at age 8. I remember feeling physically sick with nerves and had this constant negative loop in my head about how I was just going to screw it all up. So the first tip I have when it comes to public speaking is actually to understand why we panic about it in the first place. Well, us human beings are very social creatures and we are made to be in groups. But sometimes our fear of failure within a group setting can actually subconsciously make us feel like we could be ostracized from that group if we do fail. And this would have been something that is detrimental for our distant ancestors. These days things are different. It's very, very unlikely that you fumbling up your words or forgetting them entirely is going to banish you from society. Back at university, I did a lot of public speaking because I was a course rep and an ambassador for the uni. A few students came up to me and asked me how I feel so comfortable talking in front of groups, particularly my own class. The best advice I could give is to understand the audience dynamic. I put them into 3 different groups. Number 1, the listeners. Secondly, we have the judges. And third, we have the zone of no interest, as I call it. The listeners are just those people that are paying careful attention to what you're saying, and they tend to actually take up a greater percentage of people than you think. Judges take up a much smaller percentage than what we might think, but when it does come to this category, the best way to think about it is if someone is going to judge you negatively instead of listening to you, they're not worth your time, and often it comes from their own deep-rooted insecurities. And finally, the zone of no interest. The zone of no interest is quite a funny one because, again, we do focus our attention towards this group at times when realistically we shouldn't pay them any attention because the whole point is they're not paying us any attention, so it's nothing to worry about in the first place. So in summary, the advice I gave my classmates when it does come to speaking is that focus on the listeners. Understand that most people are genuinely listening to you and they want you to do well. Once you understand this, and I mean really understand it, it forms the first basis of confidence. The next step is exposure. When it comes to any phobia, it's usually recommended that we expose ourselves gradually and work our way up step by step. Funnily enough, this is the complete opposite of what happened to me. When I was 16, I was nominated to become Public Relations Officer for a youth work project. Little did I know at the time that the project would go on to do really, really well, and that led to me having to represent not only my club, but the whole of Munster on Irish national television, as well as in front of quite a large audience. People have often found me quite chatty, so I think they assume that I might be really, really confident in doing public speaking, but they're 2 very, very different things. You can be very, very bubbly in casual settings, but when it does come to a formal audience, suddenly we can just tremble with fear and not want to do it. And this is exactly what happened to me. I remember thinking, absolutely not. I can't do that. I don't really have much experience with public speaking. I've never been engaged with national television before. I honestly was petrified. And to make it worse, I just got braces installed. And if I'm really honest, I still can't look back at this footage because I'm absolutely mortified, but I don't regret doing it. That experience is not something that I actually wanted to do just because I was simply petrified, but it is something that needed to happen. After that experience, pretty much every other public speaking experience just felt easier. But that's just my story. It doesn't mean that you have to jump into the deep end straight away. In fact, I probably wouldn't recommend that if you have 0 public speaking experience at all. But any exposure, even if it comes to friends and family or colleagues perhaps, is a really good first step. Then perhaps the next step could be public speaking groups. The really good thing about public speaking groups is they do understand that you are nervous and perhaps this is your first time with public speaking. Therefore, public speaking groups doesn't automatically mean you're going to be in front of a large audience. In fact, you usually do start with a smaller group and then work your way up. It can also be quite nice because you are alongside like-minded people who are all together trying to learn how to become good at public speaking. The third step is review and re-engage. Try not to be too hard on yourself here, because like any skill, it's very, very rare that someone's going to excel when trying this for the first time. The main thing to understand is that you are trying and you're trying to work on yourself, and that deserves some credit. There's actually quite a few different elements when it comes to public speaking, and reviewing means that we can identify what our strengths and weaknesses are within those elements. Here are some examples. Number 1, articulation. This is essentially our speech volume, pace, pronunciation, as well as vocabulary. I actually spoke about how I plan myself on working on articulation in another video, so feel free to go check that out. We also have body posture, use of hands, confidence and authenticity, engagement with the audience, and personality. So someone could, for example, speak very well in terms of their pace and pronunciation, and perhaps they're also quite engaging with the audience, but if they come across as fake or they don't believe in what they're saying, that also impacts public speaking. So now for my general top tips. Leading up to the event, I would actually recommend writing out a list of positive facts about your situation. Examples include, I've really practiced for this, I'm trying my best, I really believe in what I'm saying, and I'm not going to die regardless of outcome. If you feel yourself getting nervous, I would go back to this list. If you feel like an anxiety attack is brewing, this is because your emotional part of your brain, or chimp brain, as Dr. Steve Peters calls it, is hijacked you. The emotional part of our brain doesn't base things on facts, but goes off feeling entirely. It also tends to greatly over-dramatize the situation. If you want to learn more about the emotional part of your brain and how to best understand it, then I would check out the Chimp Paradox book by Dr. Steve Peters. If you are feeling super anxious, if possible, I recommend to have someone with you. This way they can talk through the actual facts of the situation and hopefully reinstate some confidence. If not, there is a technique that can be used before going on to public speak, and this is called the stop technique. It essentially involves you looking in the mirror and shouting stop. It might sound a bit silly, I actually have done this before and it worked. What's happening is you're essentially grabbing the attention of your emotional brain quite abruptly, and in that couple of seconds you can then start bringing in the rational facts about your situation. My last tip, but it's probably one of the most important, is to have realistic expectations. Becoming a proficient public speaker can take a lot of time and a lot of effort. Remember, it's okay to not always get it right, and there will be lots of mistakes. But trying to improve and really going for it is the main thing, despite what that chimp brain of yours might say. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe. Other than that, I'll see you in the next video.